Hey everybody, it's Denise Siegel. It's been a while since I've done a video. It's partially because it's just been a crazy, really since August, like end of August when I broke my foot, my ankle. Then I had a really bad cold, which uh, turned into other issues, which they thought I maybe had pneumonia. I had to go to the hospital last week. Um, it was very strange, but I think it was just a reaction to the antibiotics that I was given because I have very strange reactions to medicine. Um, Basically, I took this antibiotic that the third antibiotic I took of this type, all of a sudden I got this really intense pain in my stomach and my fever started going like I started shaking violently, like I hadn't shook since I was like probably 7 years old or something. And my fever was, I had a below normal fever when it started. And then by the time I got a couple of Tylenols into me, it was like almost 100, it was like 102 or something like that. Um, and even after the Tylenol, I still had like a pretty high fever by the time I got to the hospital. They thought I might have sepsis, but then they did a lung scan. They thought I had the beginnings of pneumonia. So anyway, um, I have Neptune and Saturn transiting my sixth house right now. Not fun. I don't recommend it. You can avoid it. So anyway, I'm okay, but it's been just a very crazy the last few months with all that kind of crap. So anyway, I'm back here talking a little bit. This is why I haven't been doing the live stuff as well because it's just been crazy. I had vertigo and all these crazy things, which I get from being a migraine sufferer. My husband, after he took me to the hospital, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They thought maybe it was the beginning of pneumonia because there was something going on with my lungs. So they gave me more antibiotics. And he's like, I don't know, maybe it's just your alien DNA. And so we had a laugh about that because every time I've taken any kind of medicine, I've had strange reactions to it. Um, I like went into full anaphylactic shock when I was given gadolinium, which is the contrast dye and MRI. Like they had to revive me. I mean, and the guy I was like, I think I'm allergic to this. It shouldn't be on my order. He's like, oh no, it's a 1 in a billion chance. Like I've been doing this for 20 years. Nobody's allergic to this. Then he apologized profusely the entire time he was giving me the MRI. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. It really freaked him out because I woke up with the doctor over me and like him like looking really freaked out and worried, but I lived. Anyway, so just one of the many strange allergies I seem to have to medicines. This I'm very I know what things I can take and they're a limited range of things. So I have to be careful. All right, so I have a couple of things to talk about here. One, I'm happy to hear that more people seem to be talking about what's really going on instead of, in this community of light workers, instead of acting like nothing's happening when it is. Um, so I put a piece out a while ago on Substack because people were worried about there being an insurrection act coming up any time in the immediate future. And it didn't look like it was going to happen. I was right. It looked like the earliest possible time was November, but I don't think it's likely. I think it's more likely that it's going to happen in the summer of next year, maybe the spring. Um, and it's interesting because I listened to Frank Faguji today. I think I'm saying his name wrong, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about, Fagluzzi. Um, and he was saying that ICE is not basically they have a 3,000 day number arrest. They want to have 3,000 people arrested every day. And apparently they're only hitting about 1,000. So they're restructuring it so that Border Patrol is in control and it's going to get more intense and more insane coming up. Now, if people already are upset about what's going on, imagine it escalating to 3 times as bad as what we're seeing now. Um, and he speculated that there's also something going on. Tulsi Gabbard's trying to reorganize things, he thinks, under this potential spying on Americans program. Now, one of the reasons I talked about going to Substack was because I got that message very loud and clear many times. I have to listen to that voice. It tells me they're going to monitor people. And I knew this last fall. And why I kind of backed off of YouTube, because I feel like YouTube is open season for, it's an open forum, it's a public forum. Whereas Substack is, you have to be a subscriber and it's a little bit more insulated. Not to say that it doesn't have its problems or that it won't be targeted as well, but I felt safer there. So there's more news. I heard that there was also encampment being built in Utah to put homeless people in, to make a workforce that is, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but this is what I heard on this guy's secular talk show. I think it's probably true, because I wouldn't put past anything of this administration or regime or whatever you want to call it, that they would do this. But according to the reporting there, Utah governor signed off on it, and it's going to be a homeless encampment. And I think the idea is to utilize them as a free labor source, so slave labor, so a work camp, for people who are homeless. And let's be honest and fair here. This isn't going to end with homeless people. It always starts with people, foreigners, Jews, homeless people, people who have mental, mental or physical handicaps. That's what happens. That's what happens in every dictatorship. We're talking about going to war with Venezuela. Now he's talking about Nigeria. I mean, it's all over the place. And, I listened to a 60 Minutes interview. I couldn't sit through the whole thing. It was too insane. But it was just like, I mean, it was just insane. I mean, it was this full on psychopathic lying kind of situation. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about this, but also psychopathy in general, because I know people have called Trump a malignant narcissist, which is basically a cluster disorder of antisocial personality disorder, narcissism, and sadism. And you would pretty much all dictators have this personality disorder. There's also other ways of putting this. I read this piece because I'm doing an investigation into something else I'm going to bring up here, but I was doing some research into psychopathy. I have read tons and tons, unfortunately, of books on the psychology, on abnormal psychology, because I find it to be very confounding and confusing about how people can behave like this. So, and since I have family member like this, I spent a lot of my time trying to deconstruct it and figure out how this is possible, that someone can behave in this way. Like they can lie like it's true, and they can manipulate, and they can hurt people, and they think it's funny. They get off on it. It's very weird. So it's a hard thing to understand if you're a normal person. And if you've never come in contact with anyone like that, it's hard to get your head around it. It just doesn't seem real. Like, who would do that? I mean, it makes no sense. And even as a young person or a kid, telling people stories about what was going on in my home, and people didn't really believe me. They just thought I was, I think, being melodramatic or exaggerating things. And unfortunately, I have the back problems to prove that it was real. I mean, there was a lot of abuse and neglect going on in my home. My mother is a lot like Donald Trump, but ironically, even her brother's name is Donald. But she's like, when I saw Trump come onto the scene, I'm like, ding. It's like, he is exactly like my mom. I mean, I'd never seen anyone who had the same pathology before, because it's so unusual. It's like 1% of the population or less. It's not a common set of weird parameters there. So I'm thankful I never really ran across anyone quite as crazy as her. But then I was extremely triggered because it was like all of that. I felt like, well, this is why I had this parent, because now I understand like how this can happen and how people can be tricked. Because one of the things people like her are really good at, or Trump, is they have a cult of personality. They have a lot of charisma. They have a lot of confidence, which is not real confidence, but it reads as confidence. And people, most people believe if you think you're awesome, other people think you're awesome. And my lesson was always, if somebody thinks they're really awesome, look below the surface, because they're probably just a narcissist. The reality is, from all my experiences, the best people are not like that. They're usually pretty humble and hard on themselves, and they try, because let's be real. I mean, how do you get better at something if you think you're so awesome that your poop doesn't stink? Then you don't actually get better. You just stay sort of in this uh, netherland of self-aggrandizement. And if you think you're perfect, then how do you perfect perfection, right? If you're somebody who's constantly learning and growing and trying to call yourself out on things that you're not that great at and researching and figuring things out, well, chances are that you're going to grow and expand your consciousness, and you're going to learn, you're going to change over time, your opinions and your platforms and your things. Um, and, that's part of the natural human development. For some people, though, they get stuck in this very immature state. Um, and they also have other things. I don't know exactly. I don't think anyone does. So the research I've done, a lot of abnormal psychology stuff, is that there is psychopathy and there's sociopathy. Psychopathy are people that are born with certain brain issues, and they've done a lot of MRI research. There's a book that came out called The Psychopath Whisperer. I read it a long time ago, but basically this guy, researcher, took an MRI and fixed it so that he could see brain scans in real time, which had really, I think he was the first to do that, and basically would show images to people who were prisoners. He did it in the prison system, who were volunteers, who scored very high on the psychopathy test, which is the hair I think there's another name to it, but it's a psychopathy test developed in Quantico, Virginia, by the FBI. And Hare was one of the psychologists who developed it, and who basically studied psychopaths. And there are certain traits that they found. And the normal person scores like somewhere between a 1 and a 6 or something. A psychopath, that goes all the way to 40. For an example, some people have estimated, who were psychologists, that Trump is somewhere around a 22, which would be in the high range of a criminal that's in the prison system. And it actually would be sort of borderline, because I think it's over 30 is considered to be true psychopath. So 22 is about, somebody who's like a robber, manipulator, very high antisocial kind of stuff, but isn't a full-blown psychopath. I read another study that said, this English group of psychologists who have a different system for determining psychopathy, and they put Trump higher than Hitler and lower than King George, I think, or something. So they actually pegged him as a psychopath. So, how people are assessed is one thing. And obviously nobody's personally assessed Trump, but you don't really have to do that, considering there's so much footage of him out there. And the reality is, if you're a trained abnormal psychologist who is deeply involved with criminal psychology, you can, I don't even think in prison, it's not a self-administered test. They talk to the person and kind of, they score it. So it's basically about as good as one of those tests that you would get if you were going into prison. Uh, okay. I was just thinking about this guy that I knew when I was at Cal Arts, who I saw him from across the way, and I'm like, this guy's going to get AIDS and die. And he had been a male prostitute. I found out I didn't know him at all. He told me his first admission to me, oh yeah, I was in prison, and I was given the test, like a psychopathy test, and I was borderline psychopath. And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? That was when I was 18. So I haven't met that many psychopaths. I think they're rare. A psychopath, again, is someone who is born back to the situation with the testing in the prisons. They found that there was differences in their brains. A psychopath is someone who has a biochemical, there's all kinds of different synapses, like there's parts of their brain that are not working properly. I think their frontal cortex is kind of repressed, which is the part of our brain that does the right thing. And there are certain they have different brain scans than a normal person. And he was seminal in that research. And he has developed some programs on how to retrain people who are caught early, young people, and how to fit into society and use that to their advantage and not do bad things. And which is great. And hopefully there'll be more development into that to sort of get people off that train of bad behavior and become productive members of society so that they can have good lives. And ultimately, that's we all want, right? For everybody to be able to get the help they need. Now, a sociopath is something very different. A sociopath is someone who has a terrible, terrible abuse and childhood situation in which they develop psychopathic traits or sociopathic traits. Basically, they mimic or look exactly like a psychopath, but they don't have the hardwired brain issue. It's more of environmental factors that cause them to become a sociopath. And we're going to look at that today because over the weekend I watched Halloween weekend, Queen of the Psychopaths, and it's about Aileen Wuornos, who is this very anomalous figure in serial killers, among serial killers. Only female serial killer who used violence to murder men. Now, there are female serial killers. They tend to be poisoners, and they tend to kill children, and they tend to kill people, like Black widows through poisoning their husbands. They don't generally act out violently. And she is the first and only, as far as I can tell, woman who acted more like a male serial killer than a female one. And she lied, she cheated, she was very aggressive, all the kind of hallmarks of a normal white male serial killer. So it's a very interesting story if you watch that documentary, which I say it's interesting because for a number of reasons. Number one, she did kill all those men, and in her trial, she said it was because they raped her. Later, she did acknowledge they didn't rape her, and that the reason she basically did what she did was because of her girlfriend. In the trial, she said this, that, she wanted to come home to her girlfriend. She loved her girlfriend so much. And she had been raped all these, like at least 300 times. She'd been gang raped and all these horrible things that happened to her, which were corroborated by a friend of hers in childhood who said, I guess things were really bad at home. Her grandmother, she was, I guess, abandoned, at 6 months by her mother and found in an attic, buried underneath something covered in flies. And it sounded like her grandparents, her grandmother was fine. Her grandmother died when she was young, and her grandfather was an alcoholic. It sounded like, I think, very abusive. And she ended up getting pregnant really young and being kicked out of the house and being homeless and turning tricks at like 14. I mean, this person had a horrible, horrible childhood and was raped. She claimed at 6 years old and then raped gang raped in high school and all these horrible things. And then she went on the road and became a hitchhiker and, was raped multiple times. So it sounded, and then she tried to kill herself. So it seems like what was going on with her was escalation of so much trauma. And then she finally attached to this woman and actually cared and fell in love with this woman and felt like a sense of family with her and felt extremely protective of her. And that's when she started carrying a gun and started feeling like if she was raped, she was going to shoot the person because she wanted to come home to her girlfriend. This is what she claimed. Now, you can't believe a thing that people like this say, as we know from Trump. Trump lies like he breathes. I mean, he just comes up with all kinds of crazy shit. And this is how all the psychopaths are. So she says all this in her trial. Then later she recants that and says, no, well, I just had been traumatized by all the rapes, but I just decided to take it out on these guys. They didn't rape me, but they sort of represented rapists to her, which probably is true. That's probably more the truth. Now, it was noted in this film, she had never killed anyone before she got involved with this woman, which is interesting. And we're going to look at the charts of these two because it's interesting to see. I have seen a correlation here with a lot of people who are psychopaths that they have a bunch of nodal stuff, right? And we don't have her exact time of birth. So we don't really know much other than we have a solar chart. So she has so this is based at noontime. So her moon would be somewhere between, it would be in Libra, but it might not be this late. This would be noon and post. But this does show a Uranus moon square, which makes a lot of sense. Here's somebody who had a lot of trauma as a child, who was neglected. And we see that there really aren't any nodal conjunctions. There's a Saturn node right here, 10 degrees. That's enough to put a dark spin on her. Maybe why she, and it squares her sun and Sirius for nurturing, why maybe she was more likely to go down the dark road with all the abuse and neglect, and other people don't, right? Because this is another question. I mean, she had a pretty extreme situation though, and the extremeness of her situation, one could argue, was part of it. Now, the other thing you got to remember is she's Pisces. She's got Ceres squaring her Saturn, and her sun is also squaring Saturn. So she's extremely sensitive. She's hypersensitive. And she's also really, people are hard on her, the Saturn square. So she's got neglect. She feels like she's put upon. She's oversensitive. She's got Mars in Capricorn. She's kind of ambitious and headstrong. And then she's got this Moon Neptune conjunction, making her even more sensitive and also more emotional. So she's hyper emotional. And you can see that when you watch her. She's just like all over the place. She's crying, like she's angry. And that's a very negative Piscean. I'm not saying all Pisces are like that, but that's a disturbed Pisces kind of configuration where they're hyper emotional and their moods are like ooh, all over the place. And that Neptune moon would make it more exaggerated. And also, the ruler being in Scorpio, power stuff and control stuff. Mercury in Aquarius, she's bright, she's intelligent, she's able to use that. And in the 12th solar, conniving, and tending towards doing things that are, lying and also manipulating and potentially getting involved in criminal activities. And, this is the negative aspect of Pisces, is that it does rule criminals, people in prison, and sort of two different personalities, okay? Fish swimming in opposite directions. So you've got all that going on, but her nodal stuff is light. I mean, she could be pushed in that direction, but she's not coming in with, maybe she's going that direction because Saturn is getting closer to the node. But you notice her girlfriend. Her girlfriend has a bunch of stuff on the node here. The North Node, Sun, Mercury, all these things are conjunct here. So whatever darkness, and she's got a Neptune square the sun. So she sort of like, they both have a victim-y kind of thing. That's another thing about the Pisces stuff is they're always feeling victimized. And this Pluto Jupiter conjunction here in Leo, sort of this aggrandized trine her Venus, sort of over the top love, but also, power stuff. And you got here Tyra Moore, who's got the sun, the node, and Mercury all conjunct, meaning she is sort of a south node in Aquarius with Saturn on it, is the fear that you're different, that you don't belong. She was very clearly a gay woman, squaring her Neptune, which squares her sun, and came here to learn to sort of put herself at the center, to be herself, to be open and loving. And she's got this Neptune square, so probably victimized a lot because of her sexuality. And the relationship as they got into it was Aileen took care of Tyra. Aileen was sort of the husband who was turning tricks and bringing the money home and supporting Tyra. And Tyra ended up turning on her in the end. The reason why Aileen really was convicted was because Tyra got her to confess. They didn't really have the evidence to put her in jail. And then if you look at that, they really didn't give her a fair trial. Now, you could say, well, but she did do it. Yeah, true. But they should have given her a fair trial, because now it doesn't look good because the prosecutor was this really, really hardcore right-wing kind of douchebag who decided that she was the worst of the worst because she was a lesbian prostitute, and put in stuff in a trial that shouldn't have been there and excluded things that shouldn't have been excluded. For example, the first man that she murdered, who she claimed raped her, it turned out he had a history of being violent and raping women, and also he was mentally disturbed. And, he knew that. He actually withheld that. He hid that evidence, and she had a public defender who didn't bother to care. So that's really problematic. I mean, then they put her to death. And granted, I personally don't believe in the death penalty. I think it would have been probably worse for her to have to stay in prison and to deal with what she did than to actually kill her. If you really want to make people come to some kind of understanding about what they did, keep them in jail, let them think about and ruminate what they did wrong. Killing someone doesn't actually solve the problem. They just come back and reincarnate. They don't even get to process what happened. And then, in my opinion, spiritually, they're more likely to do it again. You think you get rid of the problem, but you're actually just putting it off on the next generation, wherever they show up, and they pop back in, and they're going to be extremely disturbed, and you're going to see all this stuff, dark stuff, and they're going to have to deal with it in this lifetime. So it's a dumb way to deal with things spiritually, as well as immorally. The state should not have the right to kill anyone, right? So you've got, in this case, Tyra, who, because of her issues and her shadow stuff and her need to be the sort of center of attention and be loved, I think it did play a part in what kind of pushed Aileen to get more cuckoo. And whatever fears Tyra has, which she clearly has a lot, she's got a Saturn opposition and nodes stuff on both her sun and her Saturn and Mercury. She comes in with a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of feeling like she's different and nobody cares about her, no one loves her. And you got this in conjunction with Aileen, who probably fell really in love with her because she identified with that. And so Tyra kind of, I think, represented her childhood or trying to protect herself when she was young. And I think that could have been a trigger for why she went from just being kind of an outcast, prostitute, wandering kind of nomad person to becoming a killer. Now, there's lots of psychopaths and sociopaths who don't go violent. And so it's not necessary for people to necessarily go that far. But something pushed her And you can see Uranus on her Pluto and Jupiter right here. And the nodal stuff all conjunct, kind of triggering her into this role of protector, lover, and all this stuff trining her nodal stuff and kind of triggering her with Mars on the South Node to go into the darker aspects of her personality in a less turbulent situation. And look at that. Her South Node's right on her part of fortune and Saturn. She was kind of her undoing, Tyra, more. Now, and Jupiter on her Sun, so it felt really good to be in relationship with her with all this Virgo too. But here's the thing. I think if she never would have met this woman, she was spinning out of control. She's definitely had other mental health problems besides being a psychopath or sociopath. I think she was a sociopath, not a psychopath. By the end, she was saying really crazy things, like people were listening to her and kind of getting into her head. So she probably also had some other undiagnosed mental health issues. And in a healthier person, these conjunctions and activating someone's shadow stuff could be a very healing thing. It could be a thing where you can learn to let go of some of this. You guys could teach each other or help one another. Like, look at the part of fortunes near the node. It could have been a positive thing where they both could have expanded themselves and learned to be better and, more functional by working out their issues with each other. But instead, it pushed her towards being more violent. And I think something about Tyra's personality reminded her of herself of her own vulnerability, and that she needed to protect Tyra like she needed to protect the little girl within herself. Now, I'm not saying that Aileen Wuornos is not guilty or that she didn't do it. Clearly she did, and she was a full-blown sociopath. She was extremely angry. She was crazy, and probably very terrifying, person. It looked like she had like black eyes, like, that look that serial killers get when they get really angry, that their eyes turn black and it's almost like they're demonically possessed. She had that. I read that she scored a 32 on the hair psychopathy test, which is she's 30 is the cutoff. So 30, she was into the sociopath, psychopath range there. But Ted Bundy had a 39. And so Ted Bundy is a more extreme version, much more organized. She was very disorganized. She was very I think like I said, she was a sociopath, and she was highly emotional, and she was doing all these crazy behaviors and sort of acting impulsively on this rampage that went on for a couple of years. And then she finally got caught. And Tyra used Eileen's love of her, which is interesting, all that nodal stuff in Leo and Aquarius, to undo Aileen and make it so that Aileen confessed and came forward and cleaned the slate, saying that Tyra had nothing to do with it. And I'm not saying Tyra had anything directly to do with it. I'm not suggesting that. I think it was a psychological ratchet kind of situation where the personality of Tyra and her needs and her vulnerability and helplessness triggered in Aileen this overwhelming need to, it kind of pushed her out of control and triggered her trauma, and her behavior escalated from that point. So that's my take on it. I would suggest watching that. Some of you who are interested in this kind of thing, I don't really like this, serial killer stuff and everything like that, when it's like showing the pictures of the dead people and all that. I'm just interested in why people break and why do people do these horrible things. Understanding that, I think, is really important. And I do see a correlation between her behavior, if you watch that, and the way Trump behaves. Now, she's much more all over the place because she's, but the cockiness and the arrogance and the lying, like she's speaking and just sort of riffing on stuff and is very much akin to what you see with Trump. And understanding how people like this function is important, because I think a lot of people don't understand still that what he's saying, we all want to believe because of his position of power. He is the president of the United States. And we have this knee jerk kind of feeling of like, well, he's in that position and he's an authority figure and he was elected. So he's not going to lie to us. And even I know better. And I'm like thinking, well, maybe this time he's going to tell the truth, or maybe this time it's going to be, it's not conscious, but I'm like, I listen, I think, don't even, like, it's just pointless. But me, who grew up with someone like him, feels like that, feels the need to like want to give him um a second chance, or hope that he's going to somehow do the right thing. And the other thing I saw this weekend was that movie. It was not a good movie, so don't need to watch it, but House of Dynamite, which is a really, really bad movie, but it is about this nuclear strike, right? Coming from they don't know where. And so what would happen if that happened? It was very slow and laborious, and I think very tedious, and also very, in my opinion, lazy in terms of the script, very lazy. Didn't build any tension. It kept resetting the clock and showing you stuff you already saw. It was just very lazy. It should have been rewritten in a much different way, but that's my opinion. The acting was fine. Everything else about it was fine, but the script itself was crappy, and that's why it was a bad movie. But anyway, what it was trying to illustrate was the chain of command and what happens when a nuclear missile is launched. Now, in the movie, they didn't know where the missile came from. They didn't know if it was China or Russia or North Korea. And the president was put in a situation where he had to basically make a call at the last second. There's only 19 minutes to decide. Okay. That's a very short period of time. I mean, some people take that long to go to the bathroom. I'm just saying that's a very short period of time to have to gather all these people, process all this information, and decide whether you're going to basically murder millions of people around the world in response to something like that. And in the movie, it was clear that the person they had as the president was more of an Obama style president. So rational, intelligent, thoughtful. The thing that terrified me more about than the movie was the idea that this is the apparatus for how we determine whether we're going to bomb somebody. And we have somebody who's completely unhinged, who's a psychopath or a sociopath, whatever. I think probably a psychopath, because his dad was a psychopath, so it's genetic. And who is also got dementia, who can't keep a clear thought, who doesn't know what's going on. And what are you going to do if somebody like that, what his answer would have been immediately? Here's bomb them all. He would have killed everybody on the planet. I don't have any doubt. Because he's the big strong guy, and that's how he would have reacted. Like the movie said, options were either surrender or suicide, and Trump would never surrender. So it would be full on world suicide. That was the terrifying thing to me about it. Not so much, the way it was written was bad, but the idea is a scary idea. So if you're interested in learning more about how that works, I would suggest reading the book. There's a book about it, Nuclear War, I think it's called. I can't remember. And that details the whole thing. So yeah, something to think about. I mean, there's a guy that literally follows the president around who carries a briefcase, the football, with him, so that at any time, for any reason, he can fire off our nuclear missiles and destroy the world. That is a scary, scary thought when you have someone like, see, that's my neck thing, because my neck hurts from migraines. That is a scary thought. So something that all this talk about, war with Venezuela, war with Nigeria, war with this person, war with that is a little scary, in light of that fact. So anyway, have a wonderful week. Blessings to all and take care. See you soon. Oh, and if you want to book a reading, all you have to do is go to the more button below if you're on YouTube. If you're on my channel, I have a book now button where you can just hit the book now button and you can go to my schedule and schedule a reading, and it takes you to whatever time you want. So thanks all for being here, and blessings, and have a wonderful week. Happy post Halloween, All Souls Day / Day of the Dead. I hope you have a wonderful November, and I'll see you guys soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.